let's just go ahead and dive right in. My nails look a little bit better than they did the last time I saw you. Sorry, I had just taken black nail polish off in the last video. I use old pictures, not old pictures, but I use pictures as bookmarks. I just think it's fun. Usually I'll laminate them and use them as a bookmark. This book bounces from present day to back in time, and now we're on the chapter that's going to go back in time a little bit. So, it starts November 1830. Death arrived with a sweet twinkling of bells. Rose Connolly had come to dread the sound, for she'd heard it too many times already as she sat beside her sister's hospital bed, dabbing Marina's forehead, holding her hand and offering her sips of water. Every day those cursed bells rung by the acolyte, heralded the priest's arrival on the ward to deliver the sacrament and administer the ritual of extreme unction. Though only 17 years old, Rose had seen many lifetimes' worth of tragedy in the last 5 days. On Sunday, Nora had died, 3 days after her wee babe was born. On Monday, it was the brown-haired lass at the far end of the ward who'd succumbed just so soon after giving birth that there'd been no chance to learn her name, not with the family weeping and the newborn baby howling like a scalded cat, and the busy coffin maker hammering in the courtyard. On Tuesday, after 4 days of feverish agonies, followed by the birth of a son, Rebecca had mercifully succumbed, but only after Rose had been forced to endure the stench of putrid discharges crusting the sheets and oozing from between the girl's legs. The whole ward smelled of sweat and fevers and purulence. Late that night, when the groans of dying souls echoed through the corridors, Rose would startle awake from exhausted slumber to find the reality more frightful than her nightmares. Only when she stepped outside into the hospital courtyard and breathed in deeply of the cold mist could she escape the foul air of the ward. But always she had to return to the horrors, to her sisters. The bells again, Marina whispered, sunken eyelids flickering. Which poor soul is it this time? Rose glanced down at the lying ward, to where a curtain had been hastily drawn around one of the beds. Moments ago she had seen Nurse Mary Robinson set out the small table and lay out candles and a crucifix. Although she couldn't see the priest, she heard him murmuring behind that curtain, and she could smell burning candle wax. Through the great goodness of his mercy, may God pardon thee whatever sins thou hast committed. Who? Marina said again. In her agitation, she struggled to sit up to see over the rows of bed. I fear it's Bernadette, Rose said. Oh no. Rose squeezed her sister's hand. She may yet live. We have a bit of hope. The baby, whatever baby. The boy is healthy. Didn't you hear him howling in his crib this morning? Marina settled back against the pillow with a sigh, and the breath that she exhaled carried a fetid odor of death, as if already her body was rotting from within, her organs putrefying. There's the small blessing, then. Blessing. That boy would grow up an orphan. That his mother had spent the last 3 days whimpering as her belly bloated from childbed fever. Rose had seen far too many blessings over the past 7 days. If this was an example of his benevolence, then she wanted no part of him. But she uttered no such blasphemy in her sister's presence. It was not faith that had sustained Arena. It was that faith that had sustained Arena these past months, through her husband's abuse, through the nights when Rose had heard her weeping softly through the blanket that hung between their beds. What good had faith done to poor Arena? Where was God all these days as Arena labored in vain to give birth to her first child? If you hear a good woman's prayers, God, why would you let her suffer? Rose expected no answer, and none was received. All she heard was the priest's futile murmurings from behind the curtain hiding Bernadette's bed. In the name of Son, and the Holy Ghost, be there quenched in all the power of the devil, through laying it on my hands, and through the invocation of the glorious and holy Virgin Mary, Mother of God. Rose, Marina whispered. Yes, darling. I'm greatly afeard 'tis time for me as well. Time for what? The priest, confession, and what small sins could possibly trouble you? God knows your soul, darling. Do you think he doesn't see goodness there? Oh, Rose, you don't know the things I'm guilty of, all the things I'm too ashamed to tell you about. I can't die without. Don't talk to me of dying. You can't give up. You have to fight. Orina responded with a weak smile and reached up to touch her sister's hair. My little Rosie, never one to be afraid. But Rose was afraid, terribly afraid that her sister would leave her, desperately afraid that once Orina received the final blessing, she'd stop fighting and give up. Orina closed her eyes and sighed. Will you stay with me again tonight? Surely I will. And Eben, hasn't he come? Rose's hands tensed around Orina's. Do you really want him here? We're bound to each other, himself and me, for better or for worse. Mostly for worse, Rose wanted to say, but held her tongue. Eben and Orina might be bound in marriage, but it was better that he stayed away, for Rose could scarcely abide in the man's presence. For the past 4 months she had lived with Orina and Eben in Broad Street boarding house, her cot squeezed into a tiny alcove adjoining their bedroom. She had tried to stay out of Eben's way, but as Orina had grown heavy and weary with pregnancy, Rose had taken on more and more of her sister's duties in Eben's tailor shop. In the shop's back room, crammed with bolts of muslin and broadcloth, she had spied her brother-in-law's sly glances, and had noticed how often he found excuses to brush against her shoulder, to stand too close, inspecting her stitches as she labored over trousers and waistcoats. She had said nothing of this to Orina, as she knew Eben would certainly deny it, and in the end Orina would be the one to suffer. Rose wrung out a claw for the basin. As she pressed it to Orina's forehead, she wondered, where is my pretty sister gone? Not even a year of marriage, and already the light had left Orina's eyes. The sheen had gone from her flame-colored hair. All that remained was the listless shell, hair matted with sweat, face a dull mask of surrender. Weakly, Orina lifted her arm from beneath the sheet. I want you to have this, she whispered. Take it now, before Eben does. What? Take what, darling? This. Orina touched the heart-shaped locket that hung around her neck. It had a genuine gleam of gold, and Orina wore it night and day. A gift from Eben, Rose assumed. Once he had cared enough about his wife to give her such a fancy trinket. Why was he not here when she needed him most? Please, help me take it off. It's not the time for you to be giving it away, said Rose. Orina managed to slip off the necklace by herself, and she placed it in her sister's hand. It's yours, for all the comfort you've given me. I'll keep it safe for you, 'tis all. Rose replaced it in her pocket. When all this is over, darling, when you're holding your own sweet babe, I'll put it back around your neck. Orina smiled. If only that could be. It will be. The receding tinkle of bells told her the priest had finished his ministrations to the dying Bernadette, and Nurse Robinson quickly scurried over to remove the screen in preparation for the next set of visitors who had just arrived. I'm gonna have another drink of coffee. Everyone in the room fell silent with expectations as Dr. Chester Crouch walked into the maternity ward. Today, Dr. Crouch, accompanied by the hospital's head nurse, Miss Agnes Poole, as well as an entourage of 4 medical students, Dr. Crouch started his round at the answered without hesitation. I believe that ergo assumption. Mr. Kingston, a handsome and dapper young man, answered without question. I believe that ergo and tea is recommended. Good. What else might one do? He focused on the shortest of the four students, an elf-like fellow with large ears to match. Mr. Holmes. One could try cathartic to stimulate contractions. Mr. Holmes promptly answered, Good. And you, Mr. Lackaway? Dr. Crouch turned to a fair-haired man whose startled face instantly flushed red. What else might be done? This is your patient. How will you proceed? I would have to think about it. Think about it. Your grandfather and father were both physicians. Your uncle's the dean of the medical college. You've had more exposure to the medical arts than any of your classmates. Come on now, Mr. Lackaway. Have you nothing to contribute? Hopelessly, the young man shook his head. I'm sorry, sir. Sighing, Dr. Crouch turned to the fourth student, a tall, dark-haired young man. Your turn, Mr. Marshall. What else might be done in this situation? A patient in labor who is not progressing. The student said, I would urge her to sit up or stand, and if she is able, to walk about the ward. What else? It's the only additional modality that seems appropriate to me. And what of bleeding the patient as a treatment? A pause, then deliberately, I'm not convinced of its efficacy. Dr. Crouch gave a startled laugh. You are not convinced. On the farm where I grew up, I experimented with bleeding as well as cupping. I lost just as many cows with it as without it. On the farm? You're talking about bleeding cows and pigs. Nurse Agnes Poole snickered. We are dealing with human beings here, not beasts, Mr. Marshall, said Dr. Crouch. A therapeutic bleeding, I have found in my own experience, is quite effective for relieving pain. It relaxes the patient so she may properly dilate. If the ergo and cathartic method don't work, then I will most certainly bleed this patient. He handed the soiled towel back to Nurse Poole and moved on to Bernadette's bed. And this one, though her fever has abated, said Nurse Poole, the discharge has become quite foul. She spent the night in great discomfort. Again, Dr. Crouch reached underneath the sheet to palpitate the internal organs. Bernadette gave a weak groan. Yes, her skin is quite cool, she concurred, but in this case... He paused to look up as she received morphine. Several times, sir, as you ordered. His hand came from beneath the sheet, fingers glistening with yellowish slime. The nurse handed him the same soiled towel. Continue the morphine, he said quietly. Keep her comfortable. It was as good as the death pronouncement. Bed by bed, patient by patient, Dr. Crouch made his way down the ward. By the time he reached Arena's bed, the towel he used to wipe his hands was soaked with blood. Rose stood to greet him. Dr. Crouch. He frowned at her. It's Miss Connolly, said Rose, wondering why this man could not seem to remember her name. She had been the one to summon him at the lodging house where, for a day and a night, Arena had labored without success. Rose had been here at her sister's bedside every time Dr. Crouch had visited, yet he always seemed flummoxed when they met anew. But he did not really look at Rose. She was just an accessory female, unworthy of his second glance. He turned his attention to Nurse Poole. And how is this patient progressing? I believe the daily cathartics you prescribed last night have improved the quality of her contractions, but she has not complied with your orders to rise from bed and walk about the ward. Staring at Nurse Poole, Rose was scarcely able to hold her tongue. Walk about the ward? Were they mad? For the past 5 days, Rose had watched Arena fall steadily weaker. Surely Nurse Poole could see the obvious that her sister could scarcely sit up, much less walk. But the nurse was not even looking at Arena. Her worshipful gaze was fixed on Dr. Crouch. He reached beneath the bedsheets and probed the birth canal. Arena gave a moan of such agony that Rose could scarcely stop herself from wrenching him away. He straightened and looked at the Nurse Poole. Although the amniotic sac is ruptured, she is not yet fully dilated. He dried his hand on the filthy towel. How many days has it been? Today is the 5th, said Nurse Poole. Perhaps another dose of ergo was called for. He took Arena's wrist and felt the pulse. Her heart rate is rapid and she feels a bit feverish today. A bleeding should cool the system. Nurse Poole nodded. I'll assemble that. You have bled her enough, cut in Rose. Everyone fell silent. Dr. Crouch glanced up at her, clearly startled. What relation are you again? Her sister. I was here when you bled her the first time, Dr. Crouch, and the second time, and the third. And you can see how she's benefited, said Nurse Poole. I can tell you she is not. Because you have no training, you don't know what to look for. Do you wish me to treat her or not? Snapped Dr. Crouch. Yes, sir, but not to bleed her dry. Nurse Poole said coolly, either you hold your tongue or leave the ward, Miss Colony, and allow the doctor to do what is necessary. I have no time to bleed her today anyway, Dr. Crouch said pointedly, looking at his pocket watch. I have an appointment in an hour and then a lecture to prepare. I'll stop in to see the patient first thing in the morning. Perhaps by then it will be more obvious to Miss Connolly, said Rose, to Miss Connolly that further treatment is indeed necessary. He snapped his watch close. Gentlemen, I shall see you in the morning at the lecture, 9 a.m. Good night. He gave a nod and turned to leave. As he strode away, 4 medical students trailed after like obedient ducklings. Rose ran after them. Sir, Mr. Marshall, isn't it? The tallest of the students turned. It was the dark-haired young man who'd earlier questioned the wisdom of bleeding in a laboring mother, the student who'd said he'd grown up on a farm. One look at his ill-fitting suit told her that he indeed came from humbler circumstances than his classmates. She had been a seamstress long enough to recognize good cloth, and his suit was of inferior quality, its woolen fabric dull and shapeless, and lacking the sheen of fine broadcloth. As his classmates continued out of the ward, Mr. Marshall stood looking at her expectantly. He had tired eyes, she thought, such a weary face for a young man. Unlike others, he gazed straight at her, as though regarding her an equal. I couldn't help but hear your words to the doctor, she said, about bleeding. The young man shook his head. I spoke too freely, I'm afraid. Is it true, then, what you said? I only described my observations. Am I wrong, sir? Should I allow him to bleed my sister? He hesitated, glanced uneasily at Nurse Poole, who was watching them with clear disapproval. I'm not qualified to give advice. I'm only a first-year student. Dr. Crouch is my preceptor, a fine doctor. I've watched him bleed her 3 times, and each time he and the nurses claim she's improved. But to tell the God's truth, I see no improvement. Every day, I only see... Her voice stopped, breaking, her throat thick with tears. She said softly, I only want what's best for Marina. Nurse Poole cut in. You're asking a medical student. You think he knows better than Dr. Crouch? She gave a snort. You might as well ask a stable boy, she said, and walked out of the ward. For a moment, Mr. Marshall was silent. Only after Nurse Poole was out of the room did he speak again. His words, though gentle, confirmed Rose's worst fears. I would not bleed her, he said quietly. It would do no good. A little more coffee. What would you do if she were your own sister? The man gave the sleeping Arena a pitying look. I would help her sit up in bed, apply cool compresses for fever, morphine for pain. I would see above all that she receives sufficient nourishment and fluids, and comfort Miss Colony. If I had a sister suffering so, that's what I would give her. He looked at Rose. Comfort, he said sadly, and walked away. Rose wiped away tears and walked back to Arena's bed, past a woman vomiting into a basin, another whose leg was red and swollen with erysipelas. Women in labor, women in pain. Outside, the cold rain of November fell, but in here was the wood house was cramped and cold, and Dr. Crouch had recommended that Lorena be moved to the hospital where he could more easily attend her. For charity cases such as your sister's, he said, the cost will only be what your family can bear. Warm meals, a staff of nurses and physicians, all would be waiting for her, Dr. Crouch had assured them. But not this, thought Rose, looking down the row of suffering women. Her gaze stopped on Bernadette, who now lay silent. Rose approached